Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to
What the Hell is Water?
featuring
Reed Garcia.
and Ryder Richards.
And in the west corner, weighing 180, and that's only 5% muscle, we have Ryder Richards.
This
Oh,
reminds
5% fat. Oh, I'm so sorry. I messed that one up.
It actually it has gone inverse.
Oh,
it is
okay.
now 5% muscle. It used to be 5% body fat.
Oh,
yeah, but
can you imagine 5% muscle?
yeah,
Just like
you just pull me in a wheelbarrow. That's why y'all never see me off this couch. I actually can't hold myself up. There's a little stick that holds my head up. It's rough.
I can't remember if I brought this up on the show or not, but we're gonna repeat stuff so people can get over it. Back in the day, whenever Danielle and I went to one of these museums in Montana. Montana, I believe, has some of the most fossils per square mile anywhere in the world. Just like the way the continents shifted and seas and oceans and all that kind of stuff. It happened to be that's where a ton of fossils are. And I think it was there where I saw.
And you mean like actual like seabed rock fossils, not like old people or something?
No, not like you, but older, you know, just a little bit older, not the next stage of you. Yeah, this is like old, but not quite the right conditions for gasoline, you know, so not quite as useful to us humans, but yeah, so there's all these fossils, and I think it was there where I read a plaque or whatever. It's like, well, one of the things that's hard about fossils is you get no idea what the fat content is like. And so, for example, if they found your fossil, they would be so confused. They're like,
it's just this little shriveled up skeleton.
Yes.
They had no idea that it was just 180 pounds or 172 pounds of actual fat that was there.
Yeah. Okay. I'm remembering now. The actual source was a podcast I was listening to. It was talking about dinosaur art and like how they're perceived. And it was like, hey, you know, we thought that they look like these big menacing things, and that's how people draw them. And it's like, well, if you take a whale and you draw it without knowing anything about its fat, it just looks completely different.
Yeah, right. You're just kind of like, they're like, well, we know that the bones held some weight here, right? They distributed here, but yeah, I did see something the other day, and they made a rendering of a rabbit that made it look like they're like, this is what, you know, fossil people would draw your rabbit like, and of course it looks like a velociraptor, you know.
Right.
Instead it's like, but what it really looks like is furry little bunny.
Another thing they did too is like, hey, guess what, a T-Rex is hunting like 2% of the time, but yet that's how you always see it depicted, like this big angry thing. It's like, so there's one artist like made a point to, I'm gonna go and draw all of these dinosaurs in their natural states, and it'll be like, and it's like, oh, here's this T-Rex just having a nap, I don't know, going for a nice walk, get some coffee.
The most boring T-Rex
right?
ever. Yeah.
He's like, they're on Instagram, like, oh, my hands are too small to hold a selfie. Help me out. Bring in the long neck. Come on,
Brontosaurus. Yeah, come on in. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and then you start planning to like, what could you do with a Stegosaurus? And yeah, this is kind of fun to think about, right? Because of course it's like we're looking for horror in our fossils or in our DNA, right? Or you go back to something like a trilobite or whatever, and apparently there's tons of these fossils around, and they look like, I don't know, they look pretty dang cool, but they look super weird. And then you can see them sort of like blown up in oh gosh, what is the famous horror guy? I'm totally blanking on his name now.
I'm just gonna sit here and stare at you quietly.
Yeah, I was Lovecraft, because kind of Lovecraftian thing where you take these kind of insects or, you know, octopuses or whatever, and you just sort of inflate them. Octopuses?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, you just inflate them in scale. But I do like how the fossils end up kind of becoming this like creative endeavor.
Yeah,
and like how they're always horrific though.
Well, it's funny because like you literally have to be creative, and that was something that I don't think I'd really thought about before, because I was always like, well, it's science and fossils and stuff. Like, yeah, this is what the dinosaurs look like. Like, you kind of take it for granted. But it's like, but you can't really know, you know? And I don't know. It's a good analogy for life, right? You take in all these inputs. You have this limited amount of information, but then it's up to you how you interpret it, how you put it together, and how you think about what may not be there. And obviously, some people are better about that than others, and largely because they have the training and awareness to be aware of what's going on and what they know and what they don't know. But it also made me think of just down the street last night. We were pulling up and we're just driving down the street, and all of a sudden you look over to the side, and it's like, ah! There's a giant reindeer. He's inflated, and he's like 15 feet tall. And then it's like you go like a couple houses down, right? And then there's another like one, but it's like bigger. I'm like, oh, we must be in Texas. It must be Christmas time. Everything's getting bigger over here.
You know, it is funny how the yard art has gone out of control since they figured out the little inflatable things and they put them inside, and now everything's inflatable. And I remember at Christmas walking around and seeing this house, and it was just the most insane menagerie of weird inflatables in the front yard. There must have been 20 of them. And none of them seemed to make sense, right? It was like Snoopy with a unicorn, and there's like a reindeer over here on the side, but like the unicorn had kind of like collapsed its front legs, and so it looked like it was about to gore Snoopy in the butt. And I was just like, what is happening?
Oh, definitely reminds me of
Christmas.
Something I never did in high school, which was, go around and they have the wire frame reindeers that have the lights around them. I never was someone, I saw this type of thing happen, but me personally never did it, where people would take one reindeer and then use it to mount on the other reindeer to help teach about the real Christmas miracle, the gift of life, and you just got to know that Bambis are being recreated. So if one gets shot, another one keeps coming back.
Maybe if you did that, then you could get more yard art next year.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think that's how it works. I think that's exactly how it works. Well, welcome to What the Hell is Water, everybody. Today is November 22nd, 2021, which is maybe a little interesting because it's 2-2 and then 2-1. It can be confusing,
Wow, I'm already numbers.
It's a lot of twos. And 11, you know what twice 11 is?
No.
2-2.
What? Slow down.
So many twos. Right after having a day off, I got to warm you up slowly with this math stuff.
It takes a lot.
Bring you back to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so on Friday, after Ryder called in sick with hooky, he's skipping school.
I played hooky.
Things like
It wasn't actually sick though. It's unfortunate. I'm gonna blame it on my day job.
Oh, that is a sickness, though, man. Let me tell you, the man bringing you down.
Capitalism.
Oh, goodness.
Whatever.
Are you making inflatables? Is that what you're doing?
I wish that would have been.
You are full of hot air, so
I know,
you seem like it'd be a good fit.
Yeah, except for it's tough to do through Zoom calls. Just inflate other people's egos with my hot air.
Yes, yeah. I like that. So on Friday, we brought Danielle on, and we started a discussion at the very beginning of our RV journey. So we're going to come on now, and we're going to have a couple segments over the next few weeks or whatnot where we talk about all the things we did. And some of that's a selfish endeavor because we've never really talked about it or documented it. But some of it is we want to make sure to engage with you guys, with the chat, and with you audience, both live and after the fact. So send in any questions you have for me and Danielle about our RV, about our travels, about us, any of that type of stuff. Part of this endeavor is obviously we're working with Helpful for Life, and we're growing this company, and we're doing things to help you. But some of that's also giving you a peek into our lives, and so you can see a little bit what the things are that we do. We do some things that we like to think are interesting, and we like to share that with people. And the nice thing too is when we talk about, oh hey, we went to New Mexico and we went to Roswell, and it's like, hey, do you know anything about Roswell? And then
as a matter of fact,
you have some fun conversations, right? So that's what we're looking to do with that. And we didn't end up showing any pictures on Friday, but we figured out a way we're going to do that in the future. So yeah, that's what we did on Friday. And then our challenge on Friday was actually a journal challenge. And so Danielle on her website, which I'll share here in the chat, is she's got a journal challenge where you sign up and basically get an email a day, and it gives you a prompt. And the whole point of it is to get you journaling and to see like, hey, what could journaling look like and what kind of impact could it have on my life if I started to do it? And so it's very straightforward, very simple, not meant to be a big, 17 hours a day, 5,000 words. It's just get in front of whatever it is you're going to journal on, your computer, your pen and paper, your quill and ink, and get journaling. So I'll share that link in the chat. But yeah, what about you, Ryder? You journal at all?
Yeah, I do. I used to do physical journaling. I now do it sort of digitally on an app. I use Roam actually for it, and we've talked about Roam on the show before, Roam Research. But yeah, I like to journal. It's strange. I like physical journaling better. I like writing things down better. But I heard a guy in therapy one time refer to it as a superpower. And I thought that was funny. It's like, it's interesting to consider that all you have to do is write something down, and the way your brain starts processing the information and handling it in the way that once it's outside of you, it does something different to you. And you, I'm not going to go off on it too far, but I do think it's an amazing thing to do, and whenever you're not doing it for a while, you will feel a difference. And so doing it is pretty valuable. I don't do it for more than about 15-20 minutes. So I'm not diehard about it, but I know people who do it several times throughout the day, and I know they really dedicate a lot to it. And I would assume that the payback or the feedback from it's even better when you're doing it more often.
Yeah, I do think it's important to point out that any amount of it is much infinitely better than none. And of course, thinking of a math equation, if you're a nerd like me, if you have infinity on if well, I'm gonna mess it up because my brain's not clicking that good yet, but
Yeah.
Infinitely better. Doing some versus zero.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, but there might be a point where all you're doing all day is journaling instead of living, and that wouldn't probably be optimal.
right, there is a balance, as with everything, right? But yeah, that was one thing that. So we've talked about it a couple times. We went in this Rome book club together. The first book club we were in, they were someone talking about the evolution of writing and looking at the history, and it's like, literally when writing started to be discovered and created, it changed everything, because being able to have some place outside of your head to store your information, it allows you to process things in a different way. It allows you to process and tackle larger things. It allows you to especially get help on different parts of things. And again, it also, I think there is something about literally separating it from yourself, especially when you look at it from an emotional and a feeling perspective. Those things can really control you until you take a second and write them out and get them out of your head. And I'll also mention that one form of journaling could be auditory, so you can, every phone these days probably has a voice memo app where you can just record, or you can use your computer, just record a little voice memo about, hey, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? And you don't even have to do anything with it, but there is value in getting it out of your head, especially if you're someone who experiences a little bit of anxiety and stress like that. That lingers in your head and kind of like a cloud. I like to think about it like, and another thing is if you name something, if you name a fear, you actually start to take some of the power away from that fear. So that's another thing that's kind of along these lines. But the bottom line is journaling is a good thing to at least try out, because we're not just blowing hot air up into your inflatables here. It literally makes a difference, getting things out of your head and writing those things down. So check out that journal challenge, which we've included in the chat. And I'm going to do something that we haven't done in a while, which is start our intro more than earlier than 30 minutes in.
We need another 15 minutes of warm up.
No,
Stop.
No. Helpful for life. Welcome back to What the Hell is Water. I'm Reed Garcia.
This is Ryder Richards.
And today is Monday, November 22nd, 2021. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of topics. So it's the week of Thanksgiving here in America, which I think is also important to remember and point out that Thanksgiving is an American thing, if I'm not mistaken.
Wait. What? They don't celebrate this everywhere?
I know, right? They don't celebrate all of our holidays everywhere.
What's 4th of July?
What's wrong with them?
We celebrate Cinco de Mayo.
Great one. I like that a lot. So today we're going to talk about a couple of things. One of them is something about this word called ennui. And this is not a new game that's going on Nintendo Wii. It's a different word. It's ENNUI. Ennui.
Ennui.
Ennui. Parlez-vous français? S'il vous plaît?
No.
Baguette?
Jacques
Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir? What?
Oh.
Ooh.
Je t'adore.
Oh, no. I'm out of French words here.
My only reference to that is I think the old show The Mask. Anyway.
Show or movie?
The movie. Yeah.
Somebody stop me from this tangent.
Yes, please, quickly. Okay.
Ennui.
Yes,
so we're going to talk about ennui. So tell us about ennui.
So of
just
course
briefly,
I had to
intro.
look it up because of course I blanked on it. Reed was like, "What exactly is it?" And I was like, well, it's kind of it says it's a listlessness.
Okay.
It's a lack of enthusiasm. And And it can kind of feel like I was just kind of referring to it as a sort of general malaise, a form of depression or something. Just not feeling motivated in some way.
Yeah, and another topic we're going to talk about today, after that, is the or kind of related to that, is the feeling of overwhelm, right? And how that can sometimes drive you into this thing, which is kind of funny when you use the word listlessness. And I was thinking about, you can get to a state of listlessness when you have too many lists.
Yeah, right. The lists are overwhelming.
The lists are overwhelming.
They're burying me.
Yes. But then another thing we're going to talk about, one, because it's a natural corollary to ennui and overwhelm, is thankfulness and gratefulness. So we're going to talk about that. And of course, it has to do with Thanksgiving. So we're also going to dive in a little bit about the history of Thanksgiving and why it exists and the pros and cons of celebrating it. So first, let's start off with the dark stuff. Coffee. Cheers.
Coffee. Hey, yes.
That is for your auditory pleasure, listeners. Hopefully you enjoyed that nice slurp and suck. The good old that's going to be my convenience store on the corner. The slurp and suck. I think that's a good name.
Multiple purposes.
Multiple purposes. It'll be a vape store.
Of course.
Yes,
of course.
Get that vape juice. Okay, so ennui.
Ennui. Okay, so one of the reasons I think we're going to talk about it is because sometimes I have so many things going on in my life that they're all good things. Life is great. It's chugging along at 110 miles an hour. And I just sort of wake up and I'm just kind of tired. And I don't really want to participate in certain things. And that can also feel like a form of, I don't know, like, well, what the heck is wrong with me?
Right.
And so sometimes this just sort of shows up out of the blue. It's been happening lately, but I think it's almost like a kind of stress reaction. It's like my body's like trying to calm me down or something.
Yeah.
It's just like, so I just don't end up hitting the peaks of the roller coaster in life. Everything starts flattening out for me.
Yeah. I'm going to pull out my pen and easel here.
Are you going to start journaling while I talk?
Start journaling.
This is so boring.
Wow.
I've
Who
got
is
some
this
recipes
guy?
and lists to make. What am I going to do this afternoon?
Oh my goodness, who is this guy? All right, let's see if we get this technology to work here. Boom. And then, while I'm talking about this, the thing I'm going to bring up is how I've kind of viewed mental health and emotions, and I think we might have talked about this on Friday too. I'm not sure, but the way it is everyone's going to go up and down, right? It doesn't matter how healthy you are. It doesn't matter what kind of good place you're in, anything like that. You're going to have some good days. You're going to have some bad days. And it's just a matter of where your baseline is. Oh, darn, of course the iPad's not going to work today.
Why would it not work today?
I know.
Is it because you actually wanted to use it today?
Yeah, everything else is working so well.
I know, we actually plugged everything in and it worked the first time, and
yeah. Oh well. But yes, basically, you use the word roller coaster, right? And I think that is a good analogy. Like you have your ups, you have your downs, you have this roller coaster that you're on, which we call life. And the question is, how high up or down is that roller coaster? And so if you're down here where, say, lower is more sadness, negativity, things like that, and you're going up and down around that, well, you might tip a lot lower than some other people will, right? Versus if your baseline's a lot higher, you're still having your up and down. You still have those times where you're not as happy, but it's nowhere near what some of these people may experience, right? And however, that doesn't mean that you're not experiencing those same type of feelings, just to a different depth, a different level of magnitude. And also maybe it's, let's say if these are your two lines and the line for, say, clinical depression is down here. It's like maybe every now and then you dip into that, but not like this person over here who lives in that all the time, right? And so I've met some people and have some friends who are diagnosed with clinical depression, and it's like, all right, part of it is recognizing this is the chemical makeup of my brain. This is now what I have to live with. So let's figure out how to live with this. Like it's almost, like having a dark cloud over you all the time. It's like, okay, well, how do you handle that? What do you do to recognize, like, all right, I'm not sad because I'm sad, or I'm not in a negative mood because I am. It's just because what's happening to me or at me almost.
Yeah, it's always tough to sort of figure that out, and I think one of the difficult parts. And I did a interview podcast with a guy named Zach Rutledge who wrote the Depression Relief Handbook, and so I think we'll try to throw a link to that in the chat maybe after the show or something. But Zach was just really clear about how difficult it is dealing with depression, because while you're depressed, you seem to get internalized a lot, and it becomes harder and harder for you to sort of seek outside help or to recognize what's going on to you, or you think it's only your problem.
Right.
And so it's almost in a weird way like a lot of other kind of, problems that we encounter, where they sort of keep us from getting out of them. For instance, if you drink a whole lot of alcohol, then your inhibitions are lowered, and then you think you're fine to drive, right? And depression has the same thing, but in the opposite stance, where you all of a sudden you just don't think you're fine to do anything or whatever. You think maybe this is only your problem. So it has its own sort of counteracting sort of principles in it. So it's really hard to sort of catch and deal with. But he also talked about it coming in several different flavors, that depression can show up and feel different ways at different days and different cycles of your life. And so sometimes it can feel like the world is oppressing you, and sometimes it feels like there's something inside of you that's wrong or messed up. And both of these are hard to deal with. Sometimes it's chemical, and we're talking about all these ways to counteract it. And so that's why he wrote the book. And so if you get a chance, go check out Zach Rutledge's Depression Relief Handbook. It's really pretty nice because he kind of goes at it from multiple angles. There are things you can do, such as journaling, that are good for the mental health, but there's also things you can do physically. Like, a lot of people end up becoming depressed for strange things like lack of serotonin because of gut health. Apparently, it's like 90% of your gut health comes from serotonin, or serotonin comes from gut health, which means that if your gut health is bad, you're not going to feel as good. And so there's little things like that. Some of it is dehydration. People don't drink enough water. Sometimes it can be really little things, but there's other times where it is chemical, and getting those meds balanced is tricky. But I don't maybe want to go all the way into that. I think that there was parts I just wanted to touch on about just that cycle happening in life, and the idea that somehow you can be living a great life and still not feel great. There's something weird about that, because like you're hitting, what do you mean I'm doing everything right, and why is this not
Yeah, well, and the thing in this day and age, especially in the last 15 years, that makes it that much worse is you yourself are already thinking that, maybe, like I'm the proverbial you, but then on top of that, some common thoughts that come into your head are like, but look at my life compared to everybody else. Like, I should be happier. I should be feeling better. And
right.
and then let me look on social media and compare to, why can't I be more like that or whatnot? Just the whole act of comparison, and then feeling bad about complaining about things to people, which there is something to be said about how much complaining you should do and shouldn't do, and there is a healthy amount to do, right?
Right, but it sure doesn't help whenever every time you try to confide in somebody, they go, "Oh, first world problems."
Right.
That I hate to say, but that doesn't really help.
Right. Yeah. So that's called minimizing, right?
Yeah.
And
it does put things in perspective. Thank you.
But
yeah.
And that's why it's like every time I start a complaint, I say my long-winded, like, small text, like, I recognize that this isn't as big of a problem as other people, and that there are people who are starving and hungry and all these kind of things, but my computer keeps turning off, and it's annoying, and it's bothering me, and we jest, but it is important to recognize, like, it doesn't matter what level of life you're at, how rich you are, how poor you are, how big of problems you are, how small your problems are. They are all still real problems, and all feelings are valid. That's something that someone said to me a while back, and I really like that. All feelings are valid, so don't feel bad about feeling a certain way, because guess what? That just leads to you beating yourself up, which leads to this negative cycle where it gets worse and worse, right? I've noticed that a lot with me as I've been doing this entrepreneurship stuff. Yeah, I was talking to my sister the other day. I was like, "Are you familiar with Russian nesting dolls? Are you familiar with them?"
I am.
Yes.
I am.
So for those who aren't,
through television, I don't actually own any.
Right, I don't own any myself either. But it's a doll that you open up, and then there's another doll inside.
Oh my god!
It's smaller, but then you open that one up, and there's another one inside, another one inside, another one inside, and that's how basically trying to work on anything as an entrepreneur is like. You're like, "Oh, I've got these 10 dolls to work on," and then you open them up, and it's like, "Why do they keep? There's more and more and more."
It's like a clown car of dolls.
Yeah, exactly. And so having all of these dolls and having all of these lists of all these dolls, and it's like, hey, here's all these things you have to do. One of the natural things that can occur is overwhelm and feeling really negative about all the things that you need to do. And then what happens is, okay, I've got this heightened sense of awareness of all the things that I need to do. And then, I woke up a little later than I needed to. Or, I was up, but then I messed around. I took too long getting started. Or, maybe I started working, but I wasn't working on the most important thing that I needed to be working on. Yeah. And so it's like you go one by one, and it's like, I'm failing here, I'm failing there, failing there, failing there. And I've noticed that there are days and sometimes a whole week where it's like that's what I'm focusing on, and it just sucks the life out of you. It makes it so much harder to do everything, and then I recognize, like, look, you're beating yourself up, which makes you feel bad, which makes you want to do things even less. So it's actually the opposite of the intended effect that you want it to have, right?
You want to beat yourself up so you'll have more self-discipline.
Exactly. Can't I just beat myself up the right way? I can't even beat myself up the right way.
Well, okay, so there's this thing called the cat of nine tails.
Yeah.
And you get, congratulate yourself.
Yeah, make sure you
baby.
get the right side twice, left side twice.
Yeah, I mean, this is what's so crazy about it is we tend to do this as a way to, like, I guess, stimulate ourselves by kicking ourselves. And it might work to a certain extent. But, of course, we also talk about things like putting in place really good systems or removing certain distractions from around you. So controlling your environment so that you can control things better. And there are kind of little behavior hacks and ways you can do these things. But yeah, I think what ends up happening is no matter what, those lists aren't decreasing in scale. So we've, Reed introduced me to some different concepts about like personal productivity. And I think one of them was the Kanban kind of thing. And the idea behind that is to only have certain things you work on during the day. And just focus only on those, and when you achieve them, you're done. And if you can kind of schedule out your weeks like this, that you only have certain things you focus on every day, then you just decide not to be overwhelmed by everything else. Because you have a schedule in place, you have a system, and sometimes you can give yourself a little mini vacation. You can sort of like, I'll knock this out in 3 hours and be done.
For sure. And just to clarify, I kind of colluded a couple things there. So one is there's this concept of time blocking. And then there's the concept of Kanban. So the Kanban is a method of tracking things. So it actually started in Japanese manufacturing decades ago. And it basically, think of it as a wall, and there's 3 columns. There's needs to be done, in progress, and done. And just have a sticky note, and you put your sticky note up and say, all right, here's my list of things. And then whenever you go to work on one, you grab it off the list, put it in progress, and then you work on it until you're done, and then you move it over. So it's essentially, so it's called a Kanban, Kanban. You can also, there are companies now, a lot of productivity software that uses this, and some of them also call it a board view. A very popular software is called Trello that does this. Excuse me. But the idea of using some sort of project management software like this, or even just project management with literally sticky notes on a wall, is to help you have your arms around the problem. And that's, again, we're talking about overwhelm, and we're talking about how to help prevent and avoid some of this depression, this sense of overwhelm, this ennui. And some of that is feeling like and you have your arms around things. It's kind of like I like to think about it. And one thing I found myself saying more and more, which was kind of a big realization for me, which ties in with on Friday when we were talking about the RV, is accepting that there will always be more. That is a very important step. And if you're still denying that, that is what you should look at today. Hey, there will literally always be more. And this is in your personal life, your work life, everything, right? Like if you're at a buffet, there's more food.
Right.
But yeah,
that's the more I'm interested in.
Yeah, the more I want, the good more.
More shrimp.
But yeah, when you're at home, there's always more stuff that your wife left around. There's more projects that have gone unfinished. There's more dishes that need to be done. There's more tasks to be done. There's more lists to be made. In the RV, or in your house, especially if you own a house, there's more things that need to be fixed or should be fixed, or more designing that you want to be done, or there's always going to be more. And the earlier you can get at peace with that notion, which isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do.
The earlier you wake up in the morning,
right? Yeah. The more you work, the better. All day, every day. More.
Speaking of, I woke up at 3:00 this morning.
Wow.
Somebody's car alarm was going off.
Man.
And then the more entered my head this morning.
Oh,
And I
no.
could not go back to sleep. I was thinking about all the things I need to get done. So I started work at like 3:15.
Oh, my goodness. No wonder you're so bright-eyed when you got here today.
Highly caffeinated.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating thing because that more list can get you. Like, and it's tricky for me that it shows up during sleep because I can't defend against it during the nighttime.
Right?
Yeah.
Get away. Yeah. Yeah, you got to hire somebody for that.
Yeah, I do. Like a shaman. Maybe I need somebody with some dream catchers.
Yeah.
Hang them around me.
Just a entire bed of dream catchers around the whole frame. It'll work.
I need it on like a remote that
Yeah.
lowers like
It's like a Faraday
Alexa.
cage. Yeah, exactly. Faraday cage of dream catchers. Your wife's next project. I like it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spiritual
Except for
grounding.
it's probably cultural appropriation.
Oh, that's a good-
which is something we'll have to talk about in a little bit.
Yes,
But anyway.
yes, we will. So the last thing I was going to say about the overwhelm and things like that was it actually ties in very nicely with journaling. And even if you're not journaling about it, just writing down the things that you need to do, however big or small, then lets you get them out of your head, stop worrying about them, and okay, here's where they are. And the other concept, so we talked about Kanban. The other concept you talked about was time blocking. And that's the idea of essentially scheduling work time for yourself. You can look at it as scheduling time for yourself. And that says, okay, now I have this list of things that I'm going to do. Okay, I'm going to do this on Wednesday from 8 to 10. I'm going to do this on Thursday. And there's a couple of things that are really important there when it comes to time blocking. The first one is protect your time. You got to treat that just like you would any other meeting. And if someone says, hey, can you do this during that? If you're always giving up your time, if you're not protecting your time, then it's not going to have the desired effect. And that's the thing that I've noticed among friends and family especially, and I'm sure many of you, is just being able to sit and focus on a thing without distractions. Oh my goodness, turn on do not disturb. It's crazy like how much resistance I've gotten from people as I give them that tip. They're like, no, I can't. I need to. What if someone needs me? What if there's an emergency? Yeah. And it's like, no, literally, tell me the last time you've had an emergency that needed your attention within an hour. And it's like, people most of the time are not going to be able to come up with something. Or they say, oh, that one thing that happened one time, hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
But also, guess what? Within your do not disturb settings, you can make a setting where if someone calls you twice, it comes through. And so it's like, hey, you're signaling to the outside world, I do not want to be bothered right now. And oh, by the way, with the new iOS update, so if you're on an iPhone, iPad, things like that, you can actually see your contact status if they allow you to. And so now I can see, hey, Danielle is working right now, so I'm not going to bother her. And if I send her a message, there's certain times where it'll say, hey, she has her notifications silenced, but I can press a button and say notify anyways. But it's interesting because I'm trying to train some people to use it for themselves to protect their own time. And then I'm also inherently training people who are also trying to talk to me and like, hey, don't expect me to get back to you right away. We're going to have a whole segment in the future about communication methods and all the flaws of them, but text message versus email versus phone calls versus Slack. And it may surprise you as a young strapping millennial like myself. My favorite way of talking is in person and voice. And I think people stopped using phones way too much, and it's a huge flaw, and it leads to more time wasted and more effort wasted.
Man.
And
yeah, how many times do people sit there and rewrote an email 7 times, or worried about text messages being misinterpreted?
Right.
And that very seldom happens with voice, at least for me. I know with other
it's because you
people.
have such a smooth, buttery voice. Tell me more.
Hey, I don't like you at all. Never call me again.
Yeah. Wait, no. There's no misinterpretation there.
No misinterpretation.
But wait, he's kind of hot and steamy.
Wait,
is this
was
roleplay?
I'm so confused. No, I'm a big fan of all of those steps, and I think one of the things that I really liked about some of the Kanban and the time blocking ideas is if you can set it, and one of the things is to visualize it. I'm a very visual person as an artist, and so once I can sort of visualize what I have to get done during the day, one of the things they talk about with things like flow state is you can't operate at heightened levels for a really long period of time, but you can for a little while. And it really helps if you know that this is your block of time to focus. And then you can just really grind really hard, get a whole lot done within a short period of time. And then you have to sort of rest and recuperate because a lot of us are mind workers now. We're knowledge workers. And it's just like an athlete. Like you can't sprint all day, every day.
Right.
Like maybe maybe, I don't know, you could.
You shouldn't.
Yeah,
Not
you
forever.
shouldn't. Yeah, this
You
is
can
a bad
sprint for
idea.
short periods of
Yeah,
time, but
yeah. So that's kind of interesting. Everyone kind of talks about things like, well, your life is a marathon, not a sprint, but it could just be little sprints all the time, you know. And if you sort of think of your day like that, it really changes up how you treat your day and how you think about it, how you think of your own time, how you think of your own brain. The idea that you shouldn't be, you know, working 8 hours straight with the most intense focus because it might just fry you. So
right.
maybe just block it out into little chunks.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about this productivity stuff and some other tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. But it's a whole topic in and of itself.
Yeah.
But
Sorry, it's easy to get
no,
off
you're
into.
good. But I do want to drop a couple of things in case this is the only episode you happen to listen to. There's two other concepts that are important. One is called a Pomodoro Timer, which takes this whole concept of, hey, you can only have that deep focus, that focus work for a certain amount of time. And so the traditional time for a Pomodoro Timer is 25 minutes where you're working your focus, and then you take a 5-minute break. And, you know, literally, again, kind of like we're talking about with the journaling, even though it's not that long, that 5-minute break where you have to get up, you have to, or at least start doing something completely different that's not related to what you're doing, like actually give yourself the break. That has a profound effect. And then another, and you can change the Pomodoro Timer to be whatever you want. Like 45 minutes with a 15-minute break is a very popular intervals. And then the other thing I was going to say is recognizing that, you know, every day you have a finite amount of energy to work on the really hard, the really difficult things. And so that as you're doing this time blocking, you can schedule, okay, hey, I have 2, maybe 3 blocks where I can really get at it. Yeah. So what are those 2, maybe 3 things that I'm going to do today? And so as you look at it that way and you recognize and you set your expectations like, hey, I'm not going to expect to do all of these things because I recognize that's just unrealistic. Instead, I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to do this, and if we're lucky and those things go well, maybe I'll do that. And as you do that, you spend that time either that morning or the day before, and you plan that out, then you'll notice like how you view things will shift a lot. And then another concept, which we'll just barely touch on, is recognizing that you're going to mess around. Your mind's going to wander. You're going to go, You're going to goof around, whether that's social media for you, whether that's talking to the water cooler, whether that's picking your nose and eating it or rolling up in little balls and making little booger art, whatever it is for you. Art. You know, I don't know what you artists do, you know, in your spare time.
Lots of booger art.
Yeah. But there's this,
all that paint.
there's this word I was taught a while ago. It's a New Zealand slang called faff. We're going to faff about. And we're going to talk more about that another day. But essentially, it's like recognizing like, hey, I'm not going to be completely focused. I'm going to have this kind of, it's not quite goofing around, but it's definitely not fully focused. And so I started time blocking that within my day. Like, hey, here's your scheduled time to goof around and to, maybe you are doing some things that are kind of work related, but maybe you're also having a phone call or you're doing this other thing and you schedule in that time. Well, then it gives it that spot to go versus pretending like, oh, I'm never going to do that at all throughout the day. It's like, no, be realistic. Give yourself the time and space and schedule it. And then you know, like, oh, okay, here's this distracting thought. I'm going to put this over here on the side, and then I'll pick it up back when I have that time for it.
Oh, yeah, it's a great idea. And, you know, when you're in the studio, for instance, in the art studio, there's this weird thing about cleanliness, like people like going around spending a lot of time, and you've talked about this before too, like just cleaning your space, getting your space prepped. And there's something about the time spent in the space that is doing things that feel like faffing about. They're actually sort of really productive to help you get prepared for the next step you're about to take. And so it's really fascinating to think that we're not actually wasting that time.
Right.
That time is very, very valuable. It's just that we're not used to, it doesn't feel productive in the same way. So we're not used to counting it in the same way.
And just so you guys know, if you're American, this is it's built into our culture, this lack. So always remind yourself that, like, hey, if you feel like, oh, there's always got to be more, I'm super busy. Like, how many times have you asked someone how are you or what have you been up to, and they say busy? Like, okay, everyone's not that busy. You're just not. Objectively, you're not that busy. It's a perception. It's a state of mind. Like, and then other thing too is, oh, I didn't have time for that. No. This is what you're really doing, which I encourage all of you to have this shift yourselves. You decided not to make time for that. You decided to not prioritize time for that. And regardless of which side you're on, be okay with that. That's part of life, is deciding what am I going to spend time on and what I'm not going to spend time on. And yeah, you say these things like, I didn't have time. Well, it's like, in some ways, some people be like, well, that's nicer. And it's like, well, not really, in my opinion. It's just like you're giving me a surface level kind of answer instead of telling me the truth, which is like, no, I honestly, that I can't fit that in right now. That's not a high enough priority for me. That's more honest. That's real. And that's, and there's no doubt about what's going on there. What are your thoughts on that one?
Oh, I'm a big fan of all of that. But that sort of honesty is also something that is, yeah, it can be off-putting.
For sure.
And so, sort of undertaking it, I can see undertaking it with certain friends. But most of the time, I think we're just trying to get through the day, and it's just pleasantries.
Right.
And I'm sure this is everywhere. It's not just being in the American South, but yeah, we spend a lot of time on these sort of traditional pleasantries. And I think it's just built into the culture. So maybe speaking of all that, we can kind of segue into this weird Thanksgiving thing that we've been talking about.
Well,
talk about a tradition.
Well, we should get into this Thanksgiving thing, but before we do that, we're gonna give just 30 seconds of time for, we're talking about the value of people having their time to think and reflect. So, we're gonna play some gentle music here for about 30 seconds or so. And what should people do at that time, Ryder?
Yeah, I think last time we talked about breathing. It is something too. If you're not driving, it's nice to sort of shut your eyes and just pick up on the music. Actually, let yourself get fully into it. You will hear little voices show up in your head that want to chat to you. That's okay. Just recognize that they're there, but just keep tuned into that music and just enjoy it. Just give yourself this time to enjoy it.
Welcome back.
Welcome.
Welcome to What the Hell is Water? I'm Reed Garcia.
And this is Ryder Richards.
And we just finished up talking a little bit about ennui and depression and overwhelm and some of the negative feelings that can come along with all of that. And then we talked about a little bit a couple of ways that you can use to combat that type of thing. And then we also talked a little bit about productivity. We talked about Kanban, the Kanban method, where you've got essentially your sticky notes of things to do in progress and done, and you progress the sticky note along, which is nice for visualizing the things that you've got to do. And that's actually what we did whenever we were creating our course, Kickstart Your Kitchen, which has over 190 videos, by the way. So we had over 190 videos. Each one of those things has all of these things that need to be done within them. So there's a checklist on each one of these cards, and it was very satisfying. We ended up with having more than those three simple columns, various stages of the video production process. But as we did one, we got to move it over, and it was very satisfying to move things forward and see as they all move to that done column is really cool. And in case you're like, what the heck is Kickstart Your Kitchen? That's a great question. You can go to kickstartyourkitchen.com. And that's our flagship course at Helpful for Life. You can revolutionize your cooking game in as little as a weekend, which coming up now to the holidays is a great time to get a little bit better at cooking.
Yeah. I mean, we're personally going to go visit family and let somebody else cook, but we could probably use it because next year we'll have Thanksgiving at our place.
Yeah.
We tend to swap off our holidays. And I mean, we have on occasion just outsourced Thanksgiving dinner, which is so, I don't know, it feels weird.
Well, I think it's kind of to each his own, because one of the traps of the holidays, whether it be Thanksgiving, Christmas, or whatnot, is you can want to do so much and you can want to host so well that you end up leading yourself into this state of ennui and overwhelm.
Yeah.
And sometimes to the detriment of everyone involved. And I know that's been a thing with my family. There's been times where it's like, hey, instead of making 15 meals this week, let's just make 10, and we're still going to have a great time. And maybe we'll eat a couple more leftovers or order a couple more pizzas. But the important thing, at least for us, is that we're hanging out, we're having a good time.
Yeah.
And, if you, the host, are getting a little overwhelmed and stressed and it's taking away from your experience, like, hey, maybe dial it back a little bit. And guess what? Maybe first of all, if people love you and understand and things like that, and they're going to understand and they're going to be like, yeah, absolutely. And if they don't, make sure you tell them, like, hey, this is a source of stress for me. It really gets me going and strung out. Like, hey, I'm either, can you help me out some, or we're going to do less, or maybe a combination of both.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Why not have that conversation? And what I tend to find is that most people, when I say, by the way, I'm really horrible at X, Y, and Z, a lot of people are like, great, because I love doing it and I hate it when you do it.
Right.
And they just jump in with both feet. And there's certain people who are planners as well. They just love planning the crap out of everything. I'm not one of them. So, whenever we go traveling, and especially with family, there's certain people in my family that love planning. I'm just like, yeah, have at it.
Yeah.
Like, this will be great. It's also funny because it gives them a chance to sort of work out their own OCD, and it's like their turn to shine. And, I maybe I don't really have a turn to shine, but I get to participate.
You're not very shiny, man.
No, I'm not. I just most maudlin ennui, malaise.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there's also, I mean, there are ways, right ways to help and wrong ways to help, quote unquote, right? But that's also a skill, is how do I one, entertain the guests? Two, is there a way that I can have them do some things where they're helping and participating? And one, that helps people enjoy themselves, actually, believe it or not. And of course, there's some people who are like, I'm not going to do a thing, right? But there are a lot of people who would gladly help. And so actually, this is the topic of what we're launching next week, actually. So we're launching what's called a cohort, which is like a group of people who are all going to go through something at the same time. And so we have a three-week class starting next week, where it's all about taking back the holidays and learning how to host. And that involves cooking, but that involves other things, around hospitality, making people feel welcome, how to make sure that you're aware of your own mental health and you're not overdoing it. And so what the format of that is, we'll share more information of that later this week, but is once a week we'll have a live session where we're going to do some teaching, and we'll be able to take whatever questions you guys have and work with you to make sure that you can make your holidays successful. And we'll do that for 3 weeks. And then also, as part of that, you will have the Kickstart Your Kitchen course. And so we will reference that as we're teaching. We'll say, hey, okay, if you're going to be cooking this type of thing, go check out these specific lessons that will help you with that. And so then you'll have the Kickstart Your Kitchen, the entire course, for life, so you can always go back to that and reference and learn more. And then we'll talk about some subset of it, some little slice of it that we think is most applicable to the holidays to get you going forward. And the beauty of doing this cohort, this group thing, is that you're going through it with other people, and maybe they have some questions like you do, and maybe you have some questions that they might. And so doing it at the same time and sharing ideas and pictures and things like that is part of the appeal of doing it in this cohort base.
Yeah, in the last year and a half, I've become a big fan of doing group stuff. Training with like a couple years ago, I started going to a gym that was a group gym, so we did group training. And at the time before that, I was just like, nope, never. and yet somehow I found myself in this. And it was the same when I tried to do martial arts stuff, and you're doing it in a group and you end up developing friends, and then starting to do book clubs over the last year, and then developing friendships through these things. And I'm just baffled at how hesitant I was to engage in things that were group dynamics, because they're almost always more fun and almost always learn more through them.
Yeah, and another thing too is by having those other people there, it increases the likelihood you're going to do something. The gym is a classic example of this. Like, there have been many studies that show, like, if you have a group that you're working out with, like, that is a group that you feel a little bit of accountability to. And it's like, oh, well, Stan's going to be there, Susie's going to be there. Like, I can't be the one to not show up, you know. So then you end up going, and it actually ends up being a good thing for everyone. And then you also have some of that kind of soft interaction if that's something that, you know, one, you need as a human, first of all. But even if you're like, I'm an introvert, I don't like people, like, there's value in doing those group things anyways. But speaking of group things, Thanksgiving, you know, gobble gobble.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Get to gobble it up. Blah. Oh, it's so.
We transitioned from eating and gym to food.
To food.
Tell us how we
so
gorge.
After you go to the gym, here's what you do next.
We must feast.
Yes, tryptophan. Yes. The whole thing, the whole concept of Thanksgiving is kind of fascinating, and I don't have a fantastic grasp on the history of it. It's just all the stuff I learned as a kid. And of course, when we start analyzing holidays as we do now, we're in this deconstructurist post-structural era where we're really good at breaking things down, basically,
like a turkey.
Yeah. We just bone in, chop it out, whatever, you know, stuff the guts back inside of it and cook them. I mean, it's so weird, and we have all these techniques around it, and you know, honestly, turkey's not even, for me, that good of a bird meat.
Well, you're more of a pheasant kind of guy.
Yes,
quail,
of course, quail, small,
yes.
tiny. I like eating small, tiny things.
Spatchcocked
Spatchcock.
hen.
I don't even know.
Spatchcock's technique.
Okay, says the kitchen guy.
Yeah,
You would
says
know.
the kitchen guy.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny holiday because we learn all these things and then you wonder where we learn them from, and of course these become traditions that are passed down to us. And I happened to be listening to a podcast this weekend. It's Free Thoughts, and it was on American nationalism. And somewhere in the middle of talking about the founding fathers, the guys started going off on Thanksgiving, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" But they were saying like, "Well, you know, this guy was saying that his forefathers came from like Jamestown and not Plymouth, and so like, why did the Plymouth people end up getting this holiday and it perpetuating everything?" While he's like, I'm sure we had great traditions where I was, and those didn't show up everywhere. And then they started talking about how Thanksgiving got adopted across the United States.
Yeah.
And it's very strange, but I don't think it was until the 1950s that Mississippi said it was okay to have Thanksgiving there as like a national holiday. So it has been this thing that has, like, there has been hesitancy and resistance to it because, of course, this is not other people's culture. You're taking this weird cultural concept and just shoving it down their throats, you know, or just doing it through indoctrination marketing, you know. And so I found the whole concept to be, you know, just kind of strange because I don't often think of Thanksgiving in that way. I do think, why turkey of all birds? But otherwise, I don't really think about it all that much.
Yeah. Well, I shared the link to that in the chat.
Okay,
and
cool.
For those who the podcast is called Free Thoughts, and the episode is called Nationalism in America from a couple days ago. So I shared that in the chat for you guys. But yeah, it is an interesting concept. And real quick, I have history.com up. Hopefully
good. Thank God.
Hopefully there's somewhat of a good source.
Yeah, at least not just whatever's going to come out of my brain.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so let's just define Thanksgiving, right? So Thanksgiving Day is a national holiday in the United States. And in 1621, the Plymouth colonists and the Wampanoag, I'm messing up that pronunciation, sorry, Wampanoag shared a autumn harvest feast that is acknowledged today as one of the first Thanksgiving celebrations in the colonies. For more than 2 centuries, days of Thanksgiving were celebrated by individual colonies and states. It wasn't until 1863, in the midst of Civil War, that Abraham Lincoln proclaimed a national Thanksgiving holiday to be held each November. And, you know, I think it's interesting. I would be curious to know more about the founding and how it became this national thing, but I wouldn't be surprised if Lincoln was doing it as this way to, almost as a PR and a spin to bring people together, right? You know, that's a common technique, is if you give people a common enemy or something third party for them to rally around, it can be a very uniting type of thing. And, you know, not to get political, but to get slightly political, that was one thing I've heard around coronavirus, right? Some people say that, hey, when COVID came around, Trump had an opportunity. Here's a third party for us all to unite around and fight against this third thing, right? Kind of like a war. That war brings a nation together because we're all together fighting against the bad thing. And instead, that COVID, due to him and many other people, I'm sure, and then many other factors outside of everyone's control, it became this thing that actually divided us. And we had this thing where it's like, oh, I'm for the vaccine or I'm against the vaccine, or I'm wearing a mask or I'm not wearing a mask. And I'm not taking a side right now on any of that stuff. But the idea of having this thing that could be used to unite or to take people away, I'd be curious if old Abe during the Civil War was doing that as a way to, hey, we're all fighting, but let's bring together during this thing.
Yeah, and you're if you're going to sort of jump, if you're curious about these kind of things, definitely jump into that podcast, because the guy talks about the different ways that we kind of came together as a nation, right? There is this idea that we're a melting pot, and that sort of, he starts bringing up this notion of the crucible, and sort of what it takes to get through it. But there's alternate notions too that are more about just us being a more creative country or something like that, that isn't based around like forging identities together, but actually like working alongside each other and having different traditions. But there's also just this like, what is nationalism? And it's kind of funny that there are these kind of moments that where people have to sort of buy into some sort of thing that they can be patriotic about. So there has to be some sort of story or narrative there that will get us over different humps and will get us past certain points in time. And they talked about Lincoln being one of the people that was, this idea was kind of passed to him. It was like, hey, we're in a sticky spot right now. This might be the only way that we can pull everyone together and move forward. We can both deal with the slavery, we can deal with the economy, but we can also sort of join around this larger idea of what America can be. And so the idea that Thanksgiving showed up in there at all, super strange to me. But it is kind of this idea of coming back to this myth of what we're actually about. And there is this kind of notion of Puritan values that runs through it, and some of these other kinds of things, but also this tribal overcoming, right? Working with the indigenous populations, and this idea of being thankful and being grateful. And all those are actually wonderful reminders that we should probably have more often.
Yeah. And that's one of the a couple of things that really jog my memory there of things that I really love about America. And one of them is the fact that you can, and based on where you live, maybe it's harder to do this or easier to do this, but you can engage with so many other cultures and so many other traditions that can be very valuable to you. And by the way, a lot of the things that we are now proving with science that are good for you to do objectively, are certain cultures have been practicing certain things for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that they just kind of figured out intuitively. And now we're having the science to back those things up. So for example, on Thursday, when we were talking about relationships, one of the things we talked about was having a weekly meeting with your significant other. And one of the things that I brought up was the practice of Shabbat, which is a Jewish practice, which I discovered from a podcast. And it was like, hey, that's essentially a weekly family meeting. And there's some other ceremonial things that go with it. And there's food involved and things like that. And not going to go into exactly what all it is, but the whole idea is like, hey, I can recognize that this culture has something that works out well and has all of these benefits for my relationship, for my well-being, all these types of things. And one of the things that we've talked about a couple times before, but cultural appropriation, which, we'll go on in depth another day, but it's something that on the whole, I'm not the biggest fan of, because it feels very much like very cancel culture-ish. It's like, hey, you're trying to celebrate and learn some part of this culture, which some people may not go in it with that mindset, right? Mind you. But if I'm trying to do something but I'm doing it slightly wrong, in my mind, if I'm doing it in good faith, that's better than me not trying at all. And I feel like this whole like, hey, you can't do that, that's culture appropriation, actually encourages people to go more to their silos and less to like the discover and learn, versus trying to discover and learn. And part of traditions, part of culture, part of nationalism, that changes, right? That changes over time, especially decades go by, centuries go by, things change a lot. And so, yes, I really like the idea of, the nice thing about America, having all these different cultures, you can pull some things from each of them. And then the other thing I was going to say was, how can you be mad at something that is about, hey, let's all be thankful for a day? It's like, pitchforks, like, right? Yeah, it's like, so it's a clever move in that sense. Which I don't know if from the beginning it was that strong of a tie, or if that's something that just kind of was a seed that planted and grew and got bigger and bigger. But it's certainly something that I'm really glad is a part where at least once a year, someone has to at least think about, and maybe even say, like, I am thankful for, I am grateful for, which, by the way, is another great counter to ennui, to depression, to all these
Yeah.
things, overwhelm, all these types of things, is anchoring yourself in what you're grateful for.
It's one of the, and we were talking about journaling earlier, and it is something that I try to write down something every day that I'm grateful for, and I'm not great at it, but I'm giving it a shot, and it does seem to help. It does seem to help keep things in perspective. So, yeah, Thanksgiving being one of these primary times that, you know, even if you want to dismiss all the sort of narratives and stories and the quote lies, because I don't know if any of this actually happened, but I don't know if Christmas or Easter or anything else happened either. But if you can just sort of get past that and maybe take the heart of it, the idea of being grateful or thankful or something like that, figure out what that is for you, what that is for your family, if you're going to spend time around your family, or if it's the family that you have made.
Yeah, and that last sentence there is a really important one, right? The family you choose versus the family you're dealt, I guess.
Yeah,
right? The whole blood is thicker than water, which, by the way, do you know the full quote for that?
No.
Okay, I'm
no.
gonna look one up because it's one that's like quoted all the time, but it's like, actually, if you take it in its full context, it doesn't mean exactly what you think it is. So,
well, I mean, blood is thicker than water. It's I don't know why water was I don't know. Was it that valuable back then?
I typed it in, and the first thing says 4 quotes you have been terribly misquoting.
Oh, nice.
So generally people say blood is thicker than water to be like, oh, we're choosing family over friends because blood's thicker than water. We share blood. And what it actually means, the actual saying is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Which means the saying is actually the exact opposite of what we use it. The womb being, the belly where the baby grows.
Amniotic fluid.
Yeah,
or whatever.
it's like, hey,
right,
that's
yeah.
actually not that thick compared to the blood. So, yeah.
So the blood of the covenant, meaning if
like
we're brothers in Christ or something.
Or you make some sort of a covenant. It's kind of like a contract.
Okay,
like,
yeah,
we make this covenant together. And so it's like that bond is actually stronger than, just that water you're floating around when you're born. So it's kind of
just
funny.
the fact that you shared water with your brother.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But this is all to say, and I think this is a good challenge for people today. We've kind of had some talks over the last few days around it, but encouraging people to take back their traditions, right? If it's something that they aren't really a big fan of or isn't going how they want, recognize like, yes, you should do some compromise, and you can't have it be exactly like you want, especially the more and more people that get involved. But even if you're just taking back a little part, right? Maybe you're making yourself a little time block. It's like, hey, look, I know we always do this on Thanksgiving, but this Thanksgiving, my wife and I, we're going to take 30 minutes to be by ourselves. We're going to go on a walk, and that's going to be our new part. Like, we want to get away from it all, and we want to just go on this walk through nature or around the block, whatever, and we're going to intentionally do that right in the middle of all of the chaos and fun and anger and all the things that are going on. Maybe that's a new tradition that you might want to start. And I did want to point out as well, the whole blood
escape,
is thicker.
I think
Escape,
is a great
exactly.
tradition.
But some of that also may be choosing to do some stuff with friends, right?
Yeah.
Not feeling this obligation that you need to do something with this family, or you have to do something with this family. At the end of the day, you don't have to do anything. Like, you get to decide what you do. Now, if you've got an ankle bracelet on that's tying you to a certain place, you may have some restrictions on what you have to do, but that's neither here nor there. So the challenge for you guys today is to take back some of your holidays this week and make sure that you are doing something that you want to do. And even if that's just a 15-minute block or a 30-minute block or whatever it may be. And another kind of co-challenge with that is really force yourself to be grateful and write it down. Write it down, because it does make a big difference. Just writing out, okay, here's a list of things that I'm grateful for. And the beauty of it is at the very base, like, you could be grateful for being alive. So it doesn't matter how crappy your situation is, just another day above ground, the sun's shining or not shining, whatever. There's something you can find, even if you have to force yourself. And if you find yourself really having to force yourself, then maybe that's a message. Like, all right, I need to either find a mind shift or figure out some ways I can create more things to be grateful for in my life.
Yeah, one of the ones I heard the other day was just like, oh, do your eyes work? Be grateful. Like, it's like, whoa, okay, that's rough. That's profound. I hadn't thought that way, but yeah, there's almost always something.
Yeah, and it's funny because, the phrase where it's like, you never really value it till it's gone. I'm butchering it a little bit, but yeah, that's the type of thing. Like, yeah, you don't know how much you like your hands until you start having hand issues, and you don't know how much you like your hearing until you get older and it starts to go. And so yeah, so just find something to be grateful for, and figure out a way to take back the holidays a little bit for yourself. And of course, naturally, keep your eyes out for the thing that we're launching next week, where we're going to help you take back the holidays and help you be an amazing host. And oh, by the way, both for Kickstart Your Kitchen and for this cohort thing we're talking about, they make wonderful gifts. So if you are going somewhere where you're not doing all of the things, or it's just not your jam, but maybe you know someone in your life who could benefit from that, then you can either buy that for them or share it with them. So that is it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Monday. Have a wonderful day.